Welcome to One on One. I'm Greg Bassett, your host from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. And today we have another newsmaker with us, County Council President John Cannon. Welcome, John.
Pleasure to be here. How are you?
So you have been through the ringer here the last couple of weeks. You just finally passed a $135 million budget.
Right. We've been busy.
What do you want to tell me about the budget?
The budget's looking very good. We're fortunate that projections are high for the economy as far as growth is occurring. We're looking at higher income tax revenue projections, which is very good. Property values are going up. So I think we've seen a reverse certainly of the downward trends from the recession, and everybody's been waiting for it. But I think it's becoming a reality.
Right, and that was one of the themes in this, is that it's time to make up for some of the spending that couldn't take place during the recession. Sheriff's office is getting some more money.
Yeah, very true. The Sheriff's Office is getting more money, mostly I'd say because they're in the collective bargaining process where that's coming to fruition.
Right.
But also 3% increases were given, COLA increases were given to the county employees, and the county employees haven't had an increase in years.
Right.
And with that together with furloughs, they've really held it together for the county. So I think it's very warranted.
Right, it's funny, the county employees is an interesting issue because it was the salary study from way back in 2000, 2001 that led to the big tax increase, that led to the Voice initiative, that led to the revenue cap.
Sure.
So raises for county employees has sort of been an issue, but yeah, they have not really been able to get raises for many years.
Well, when the recession first hit, what I think people don't realize is the county itself had to cut its budget by about 18%. And most of this was driven by the state, where the state just kept taking all the funding away, which really was county money. It was our county tax dollars that had gone to the state and were supposed to come back. I'm talking about roads and other particulars, but that's really what put a bind on the county locally.
Right.
But we persevered through that, and I'm glad to see it. And of course, it's looking much better now.
Right. Now the way it all works is the county executive presents a budget. You guys can cut it. You can't really add to it, but you can add for your own spending within the council spending within the budget. I guess you can't do anything about that.
Well, when you refer to the council spending, the council actually presents its own budget to the executive along with all the other department heads. Right. And you're right. Yes, the executive has no control over the council's budget. Right. When it comes back to the council, then the council has the authority to cut pretty much any department that we choose. What we can't add, we can add to the Board of Education, but we can't add, if we do make a cut, then we can only make a recommendation to the executive branch as to where we would like to see those funds transferred.
Right. And of course, the most exciting issue this year was the Warwick tuition plan.
Sure.
Do you want to talk about that? You were kind of on the fence about it. You were on the fence
fine,
about it. It looked like it got cut in the initial thing, then it's back in a contingency. Tell me what's going on with this thing.
Well, it was a huge misnomer. I would have to say in the line of how things developed, it was about 2 weeks before we actually came to our final deliberations, because we had talked to Ray Hoy in length since early on in the year.
And he's the president of Warwick Community College.
President of Warwick Community College, yes. And at that point in time, it had been last dollar funding as we were to anticipate. But I'd say about 2 weeks before, when questions started really coming up, we were informed that a family earning $150,000 could possibly qualify. So that automatically brought in questions. Well, what are the standards? How are these going to be set? And long story short, we just decided as a council that it really would be good to have this, in some type of very solid format through resolution,
right,
where the project is literally established through resolution, right, with all the parameters in place. And at that point in time, then yes, then the council would certainly, would fund it with a majority vote, which I think probably what we're going to see. What happened really is in our session when we made that decision, and it was then portrayed to the press that we had cut the budget for the Warwick
Well, as
program.
someone who was sitting there, that's what it looked like to me.
Okay. What we really did,
You voted it down. It was a 5-2 vote not to go forward with this thing in the budget, this portion of the budget.
we voted, and I'll put signs up as we go
I
along from the
understand.
meetings because it confused a lot of people.
Right.
But what we did is that we just cut the funding from the Economic Development Fund
Right.
and requested to the executive that it be transferred to contingency.
Right.
So we didn't cut the funding. If we cut the funding, we would have asked them to reduce the reserves or to implement a tax cut or
It would
something
have been
to
a
that
push on the
effect.
other end of the balloon, right? I see.
Exactly.
Right.
So we kept that funding alive. We just simply parked it in and made the request to park it in contingency. And
Right.
I can see how it got misconstrued. I certainly can understand that.
Right. Well, and also as the budget was being changed, it's you guys were voting on different portions of the budget throughout.
Yes.
So it looked like this was going to advance to the final vote, and this was not going to advance. I mean, the different things. And
Sure.
that's what looked like happened with the Warwick situation.
Right.
And also, the council members who voted against it were pretty clear in their concerns about the plan.
Yeah. And we respect that. One thing about the council is that there can be differences of opinion, and we very much respect each other's opinions.
Right.
We still get along, and certainly there were a couple of council members that did have concerns about the plan as a whole. But from my perspective, and only my perspective, I've always felt that with the great job that Ray Hoy does at Warwick Community College, we do know that Warwick Community College is an investment in the community, and that the investments that we would make for the students to go to Warwick Community College would certainly come back as a return on our investment once they graduated. And I
Right.
really feel strongly about that. I'm as conservative as anyone else, and I certainly I'm not terribly in favor of just handouts. I think there has to be some type of qualification there.
Right.
And I think it is a return on an investment more so than it is a free ride.
Right.
And Ray Hoy, more than anyone, knows how to track things and to let us know, and as we progress down the years, whether it's been truly successful or not, which is also important. You have to track these processes to make sure you are spending the taxpayers' dollars
Right.
wisely.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. It's hard to have accountability for it. I mean, even in the Western Maryland counties where they do this, you can't really. I don't know if you can really, for sure, peg any development to that program. I mean, it's kind of hard
Sure.
to tie it all together. So there's just the anecdotal type stuff.
Well, there is the anecdotal, but what surprised me was that as it is right now, Dr. Hoy actually tracks current graduates.
Right.
And as long as they're not moving out of the state of Maryland to a certain degree, he can get a pretty good idea of how of the success of those students.
Right.
Whether or not they're going to another, whether they're going to go to another college to finish their education, or whether they're just going to go out and get a job as well.
Right.
So, granted, it may not be a fine science, but he certainly knows how to peg it better
Right.
than anyone else.
And in the discussion back and forth, you were one of the ones who raised the $150,000. If the parents have, means, should we be funding the tuition for free? And his answer basically was, people make $150 are not sending their kids to Warwick. So but that's anecdotal. That's not really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I felt, and the council actually felt as well, that
Right.
there needed to be more specifics.
Right. So this year it's 246,000.
I believe the number's 265.
265?
It could be. It's changed a little. You're right. It's
yeah.
in the $250,000 range, though. Right.
So it's in a contingency fund, and you guys, and ultimately, this thing would cost the county around $600,000 a year once the kids are all in
Sure.
the pipeline. So 246.
The first 3 years is a total of about 1.47 million.
Right.
Yeah, the first 3 years.
Right.
And then from there it levels out to about 665 a year. So it is a very serious commitment. We have to make
Right.
sure that we want to make sure we get it right.
And that's basically a guess too. No one knows how many kids are going to take advantage, how many kids will qualify for the other funding, community foundation, that endowment. No one
Right.
really knows.
Very good point. I mean, it's just based on right now some projections that Dr. Hoy put together. I would say it wouldn't go up. I imagine that it would go down, if anything.
Right. So it's in the contingency. Now what happens? You guys are going to talk about it some more?
We need to try to fast track a few things in order to meet some timelines that are necessary for the graduating students this year, as well as those that would be applying for assistance for the next fall
Right. There's a
semester.
deadline for some applications. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And initially we thought that deadline might be falling like the day after our next council meeting. And I've had a lot of discussions to try to see how we can possibly not so much fast track the legislation, but the work session to get things moving so that we can make a sound decision on that. Dr. Hoy's will be out of town for part of that period of time, so it's a little bit restricted, but I think we'll move forward. I'm hoping within, I'd like to say within a month, 6 weeks, that we should have something ironed out.
Okay. The other thing that was interesting, just as an observer, was the legal counsel issue.
Okay.
Now, you guys, there's always been a county law department for several years. There's been
Sure.
a county law department.
Sure.
County executive Bob Culver's elected. He changes that. It goes to a situation where there's someone on a retainer system, but there's still people in the department. And then you guys put money in the budget for your own attorney. What was the reason for that?
What we felt happened back in, I guess it's in the December period of time, we were looking, we knew Ed Baker was leaving and we had to replace Ed. However it might be done, whether or not we replaced it with another attorney in-house or whether it was contracting out, that was still up in the air. And the executive came to the council and said, well, you know, I've hired Paul Wilbur, it's a contract, and I have Paul Wilbur now, it's going to be working for the county. And the council felt that
It was handled very strangely, I think, on his part.
we felt that we felt that it had to be done, that it had to be done with the two bodies' input. I mean,
Right.
the charter specifies that this is the only department in which the executive and the council both oversee that department. They both are, you know, responsible for that department. And it was the one department where unilaterally changes were being made. The other part of the charter says very specifically that if you're going to reorganize,
Right.
there has to be a very specific plan in place. And that goes so far as to say 60 days before you present the budget to the council, there has to be a plan in place
Right.
that literally breaks down what the costs are, what the justification would be. The council was very concerned because more so than anything, the cost of what the current attorney is costing us is much more than what we were paying with benefits to the attorneys that were there previously.
So that's the spending track's higher?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's one thing to say, oh, well, we're cutting costs. You know, look, we aren't spending as much money. Well, that's simply, you know, it's a measure of how you look at it. I mean, if you're transferring some of the responsibilities from the law department to other departments, well, yeah, you're going to save money, but you could have done that with the same attorneys you already had in-house. It's not really for us to decide one way or the other unless we were to be able to actually see those numbers. And that's why the charter so specifically requires some type of a budget for a plan of reorganization. So we've always felt as a council that there was certainly a reorganization. You've taken the entire law department, it's no longer there. It's now across the street and it's not even, they're not even employees anymore. That's a reorganization.
Right.
The executive contends that it's not a reorganization. And, you know, we feel that we're just trying to follow what's in the charter, which is, you know, by law.
Right. I get the sense that he thinks, he's convinced himself that he's trying to do the right thing and he doesn't understand why there's pushback on this.
I believe he feels that way. I certainly do. But, you know, it's a matter of looking, you know, if that is the right way, and this is what we're saying, just show us the numbers.
Right.
Let us see that, because it's sort of, it seems to be kind of against what I would call common sense when you actually see the numbers for what you are paying your current attorney with benefits, and then you see what it is, you know, what the costs are now per hour. How can it really be saving us for the same amount of hours of service?
Right.
How can you say that's costing us more?
And is it really just a numbers thing, or is there a level of comfort? I mean, I know in the city a couple years ago there was a situation where they weren't comfortable with the attorney that the mayor had picked, and the council wanted its own attorney briefly, and that was put out.
That's good.
Is it one of those things, or?
Well, that's a good point too. It's very funny. I know that initially, when I've always felt a little bit uncertain as to how this process would work, where the county attorney represents the council and the executive both.
Right.
We ran into that conflict with the collective bargaining, actually, where Ed Baker was taking the position with Rick Pollitt when Rick brought the collective bargaining to the council, and the council said, well, this, it appears to us that the collective bargaining does not guarantee the checks and balances system in place by an executive legislative branch of government.
Right.
So we're not quite sure this is what what is best for the county, and it was upheld in court. The funny thing is that when the council challenged it, Mr. Baker, and the court upheld it. Mr. Baker then had to come across the aisle from
Right.
from advocating for
Right.
for one side to then advocating just the opposite argument,
Right.
and did so very well. But I've always felt that it'd probably be best to have two, if it can be a cost saving, if it's within reason. But I've always felt that we could work with one for both, but you never know what tides turn and where you might need separate legal counsel on your own. So that's what the council chose to do during this period of time. I mean, as it is right now, our county attorney is actually an acting county attorney and has been for months, for 6 months.
Right.
And I think by at least bringing in our own counsel, I feel we're a bit more on solid ground.
Right. Now, there is an attorney who sits there in the meetings, and she is still part of the
Rachel,
county, Rachel Harris, is part of the county law department.
Right. She
She's
has been
the
part
remnant of the department.
Exactly. She's sort of the last holdout from
Right.
that, and she'll be transferring to state's attorney's office
Okay.
in July.
Interesting.
Yes.
Now, it feels like I'm berating you, but there's just one other
You
little
are
issue,
berating me.
little
You are.
sticky issue.
You always do.
The economic development position, you talk about the county executive having a plan and stuff like that. This is a case where perhaps there wasn't a plan, and it's been an issue since the first day. You want to talk about that a little bit?
We were asked from the very beginning a year ago, why are you guys creating an economic development department? You have Dave Ryan with SWED, and he's doing a great job. And we said, well, we know that.
I get a taste of your life if we're like at a chamber function, like in the food line together, and I see people come up and ask you these questions.
Right, yeah,
And
sure.
you're like, oh, I need to find that out.
Right.
So I understand how this works, but go ahead, tell me.
Well, a year ago, we're subject to criticisms of why are you doing this? You're spending more money and all that. Well, we said, no, this is we want to see Wicomico County with an office that's going to market Wicomico County for economic development. An office that's going to apply for the grants that are left out there that go by the wayside so often, where we don't take advantage of that. We really wanted to have someone in there that we thought would really move the county forward. Dave does a really great job working with the businesses behind the scenes and structuring deals all the time to bring businesses to the Eastern Shore and to keep them here.
This is Dave Ryan from
Dave
Salisbury
Ryan from Wicomico Economic
Right.
Development. As he said, it's always nice to have more boots on the ground.
Right.
And that's what this was, our intention over a year ago was to actually have someone that was going to market the county and get us moving forward. Jake Day and the city just finished their marketing strategy, et cetera. So this was somewhat similar to that, where we'd wrap up the county, the Board of Education, all the aesthetics of Wicomico County that make it so great, the shorebirds, the entire thing, the airport, transportation and the waterways and things like that. So we have a lot to talk about.
Right.
And we just felt that it was time to probably, start that process. What we were faced with this year was there wasn't a lot of progress in that area.
So the county executive was going to hire someone for that department, but that never happened.
Right, and we would have liked to have seen, an outreach effort. There was an outreach effort, but it was only for, the first month or so, and there was nothing moved forward since then.
There was sort of a trust me quality to the whole thing, where he wanted, give me the money, I'm going to go grow economic development, like trust me. It felt like that.
Right. Well, the idea was, it's hard to hire anyone if we don't have any funding in place to show that individual what he has to work with or she
Right.
has to work with. So we said that's fine. We'll go ahead with that. So we found there was little outreach after the initial couple of months. I think there was a lot of concern the fact that the building across the street, an office was leased across the street, and pretty much went vacant for the 11 months, which is about $35,000 total costs.
Right.
Granted, a member from Public Works was transferred to the office.
They had an engineer over there, yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it was just, I mean, it
Wasn't the intent.
It wasn't anything,
Right.
substantial, I think, and it certainly, we didn't see where that was economic development per se. So with that being said, the council again said, listen, if we want to go down this route again, let's see exactly where you want to head, what you want to do,
Right.
and then we'll start from there.
So where does that stand now? There's the money that's given to SWED, but what else is in the budget for that?
That's pretty much it. There's money that was given to SWED. Part of the economic development funding, about a little over $200,000, was also in economic development, but actually for airport improvements. I wasn't sure whether that was the right place for it to be, whether it could be there at the airport, but I trust Wayne Strausberg, and he felt that it was best to leave it as it was in economic development as a grant to the airport.
Right. And then, of course, the Warwick thing is considered economic development on its own.
Sure, and that was the other part of it that was
Right.
that's wrapped up in economic development. Yeah, right.
Right. Now, on the positive side, not that this wasn't all positive, but on the less tension side, the school budget, there was no fighting about school spending this year. What
No.
happened there?
Besides what people think, I guess, about the county government,
Right.
I mean, I've always felt that it's very important to fund the schools as they are, and we have maintenance of effort, which is what we meet, which is what we're required to meet by the state of Maryland, and that's what we did. We matched the maintenance of effort for the state of Maryland.
Right. But you're not going to win a prize for doing maintenance of effort. You're supposed to do that. But I mean,
No.
still, there wasn't the back and forth that we're used to.
No, and I think also that that this council is more receptive with the Board of Education and what their plans are. I don't think there's not a lot of you don't see a lot of adversarial relationships between the Board of Education and the council. I know that that's been the case in the past.
Right.
But this is a very pragmatic group of people, I think, and we appreciate what the Board of Education is doing.
I interviewed Donna Hanlon, the incoming superintendent, yesterday
Sure.
for a newspaper story. And she said she came to one of the budget hearings and she was like in the car, like girding for this awful situation, and got in there and it was a love fest. And she wasn't expecting that at all.
Right. Well, it's a shame that people feel that they have to anticipate that.
Right.
Because
But there's a history there.
There
so,
is. There has
yeah.
been a history, and I've always felt that the Board of Education is the last person you want to treat, what's the term, the redheaded stepchild?
Right.
I don't even know if that's politically correct anymore. But
They should be the hood ornament in a lot of ways.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as long as there's accountability and we know that the spending, there's not a lot of wasteful spending, et cetera, and just with the Board of Education or any other department, I think that's the key to, being comfortable.
Now, you've had gray hair for many of the years that I've known you. But I think maybe looking at you now, you might have more gray hair because of a thing called chicken houses.
Poultry houses.
How's that going? I mean, I interviewed Joe Holloway just recently for this show,
Sure.
and I actually I have to give the council a lot of credit. The people who were opposed to the Northwest Road expansion, chicken houses that are
Right.
going to be built there, or going to be built there, whatever's happening there, that proposal, they have pretty much taken over the council meeting since February or March. You're having
Sure.
to go through this every week with the comments, some true, some untrue, lots of tension. You've been very polite through it all. But now there's a zoning initiative going on, some changes to zoning. Big hearing actually tonight when we film this
Sure.
at the Civic Center to talk about it. The council's really reacted to this. Rather than put their head in the sand to it or saying this is an isolated issue, you guys have really tried to do the right thing, it looks like to me. Is that true?
Well, we took the initiative right away. We took the initiative back in December, and a lot of people were saying, well, you take it slowly. This is important. Make sure you get it all right. Well, this had already gone through Accomack County. It had already gone through Somerset County.
Right.
We pretty much knew what the basic issues were at hand, and it needed to be addressed. And this is not something that you want sitting on the table week after week after month. You want to get it done right, but you do want to move it forward. It's important for everyone. They develop a sense of security in knowing that you've responded to their concerns. The biggest battle really is a matter of degrees. Wicomico County had a 100-foot setback, which was
Right.
from here to the wall.
Just not enough.
Yeah, and
It's
no
been
other,
enough for years, but as we go on, there's an issue with that.
Exactly. So we've implemented a 200-foot setback from a property line, 400-foot setback from another building, and we've also implemented buffers, that there be 3 rows of buffers. A lot of this came from other legislation from, as I said before, from other counties. Some of it also came from the Delmarva poultry industry. We were somewhat criticized for that, but I was actually shocked the first time that I sat down to look at what they considered to be their best management practices. Even though Wicomico County had 100-foot setbacks, they had already established guidelines such as the 200 or the 400 and other parameters and the rows of buffers. So I had to give them credit for taking that initiative.
Well, and they're the experts. They know what works. They've got a history with this.
Sure.
I mean, it's like people you're supposed to dismiss lobbyists, but lobbyists know the issues better usually than the lawmakers.
Right.
And certainly they know what works and won't work.
Right, and you can still talk to these people and tweak what you have before you. You don't have to rubber stamp what they have, and we never would do that. But I've always said that you don't begin to legislate any type of industry or business without first talking to those that are most impacted in the industry and that business.
Right.
It's just the right way to do business. On the other hand, I do feel very much so as far as the neighborhoods are concerned and the community is concerned, as far as the aesthetics. They're concerned about their property values. They're concerned about the health issues. On the property values, that's what we're trying to address through zoning. We're putting up the buffers. We're pushing them back. We're hoping that, you know, by the time the buffers are up there, you're not going to see that in your neighborhood. We also went further and restricted it and made that any poultry house in the metro core area where it's zoned residential, that it's going to have to be by special exception only if anything is done. Now, when you get out into the agriculture district, it is an agricultural district.
Right.
And you know, it's one of those things where how far can the council go to restrict what a farmer can do with his property?
Right.
And he comes to us, he goes, I'm in an agricultural district. Years ago, they wanted us to be very lenient on allowing development in the agricultural district, and I was part of that process.
Right.
And it was a very sound message that pretty much the citizens of Wicomico County felt that with their property rights, they should be allowed to build wherever they chose. That was their right. That being done, a lot of developments were put out into the agriculture district. We have the Right to Farm Act also that says if you're moving in the agriculture district, you have to understand you might get some bad odors,
right,
and there might be some loud noises and farming practices that you're not too fond of. But that is what that's what you have to accept when you move into an agricultural district. It's not cold or callous. It's just trying to say, here's we're trying to find a good medium. I understand. I appreciate what these people are saying when they come to the meetings. Right now, as it is, even with the new guidelines in place, where I live across the street from my development, I mean, they can put these houses there.
Right there on Snow Hill Road.
On
right.
Snow Hill Road.
Yeah.
And I understand that, but I also understand the fact that, yes, I live in an agricultural district, and I think that maybe with these guidelines, it would suffice. The big misnomer that we're dealing with right now is the health side of it. You can't complain, legally you can't complain about the noises and about the odors. The only thing legally that you have a leg to stand on could be health issues. And we've been inundated with
it's so subjective.
health issues.
Yeah.
It's very subjective, and a lot of supposedly respected organizations that are bringing information to us, when you actually read this information, it's somewhat disheartening, because you follow where the footnotes are, and you go back and you read other reports, and you find those reports that they are citing in their report. And those reports are talking about swine industry. They're talking about the cattle industry. They're talking about circumstances in other health issues in other countries.
Right.
And some of these reports will go back to in the 80s or the 90s. And I don't think it's not apples and oranges. How we regulate in the United States and how we regulate in Maryland is much different than how we regulate in Pennsylvania, let alone overseas.
And it seems like the state handles the health aspects. They regulate that. They have a whole system in place for that.
Well, that's an excellent point.
And then it's up to you guys to do the zoning stuff.
It's an excellent point. I addressed those concerns with our health department. I said, is there some leeway where we could inspect it annually or create some type of ordinance structure? And the state of Maryland is very specific. Not all states are the same, but the state of Maryland is very specific. And if the Maryland Department of the Environment has oversight and regulatory and regulates a particular industry, the local jurisdictions do not have the authority to usurp the state authority. So MDE pretty much says, we're covering the poultry industry, let us cover the poultry industry. Not only that, but something else that I learned even more recently was a lot of the concerns of the fans and the particulates and the ammonia particles that are coming out of the fans. That guideline is established through the Environmental Protection Agency. Those are federal guidelines that are in place. So I really feel that I appreciate the concern. I would hope that the information that's being given to the public as a whole were forthright. That's my biggest concern. Don't hand me, and I've got volumes that I go through, and I look and I go, oh, there's another swine operation, there's another cattle operation.
Right.
And I've said before, the poultry industry in Wicomico County has been here for over 100 years, and I would just like to see where are those studies. And if there are studies, discuss these with the state of Maryland if you choose to. Discuss those with the federal government if you feel it's necessary to address those concerns.
He's John Cannon. He's our Wicomico County Council President. He's had a busy, busy season here. Thanks for being here today, John.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
I'm Greg Bassler from the Salisbury Independent Newspaper. Another edition of 101 right here on PAC 14.
First Shore Federal is proud to support PAC 14 and one-on-one. We'd encourage every business to support PAC 14 and pick a program and support it, and let's make a difference.